I'd like to step back and reflect further upon the picture of Joseph that we were working through previously. Just to recap, Joseph had been sold into slavery by his brothers and reported missing to his father, along with the false assumption of being taken by a wild animal. Now Joseph landed in Egypt, as we know, and he found himself with false accusations levelled against him. After many years in prison, he was finally released because of his God-given gift to interpret Pharaoh's weird dreams about some coming good years and then some drought years. So it happened that Pharaoh placed Joseph in charge of the nation to ensure that grain from the good years was stored to cover for the coming bad years. With Joseph managing the stores, people were able to survive, although it seems that many lost everything they had simply to buy enough to survive. Now, meanwhile, back in his homeland, Joseph's family were also worried about their own food security. They had heard that there was plenty of food in Egypt, and so Jacob, that's Joseph's father, sent his sons to Egypt to buy some food. Again, it happened before they could get any grain. They had to meet with Joseph because he was in charge of the distribution. They didn't recognise him, no doubt because they thought that he was no longer alive or he was working as a slave in some faraway land. Besides, there's no way ever that they would have imagined that their younger brother, whom they sold into slavery, would now be a dignitary in Egypt. When they met with Joseph, he recognised them as his brothers immediately. Now, I have to stop here, and I have to say that Joseph had a choice at this point in time. Most would say that these men certainly deserved whatever came their way. You know, justice, an eye for an eye. In considering how Joseph had been rejected by his brothers, we could fully understand if he said to them, "Now listen here, boys, I'm Joseph, your brother, the one whom you sold into slavery. Now it's my turn. I'm going to treat you in exactly the same way that you treated me. After all, you deserve it. From now on, you are going to be my slaves." At the very least, we might feel that he was well within his rights to tell them to at least get out of the place, to leave this storeroom and to go home empty-handed. Or he could sell them some grain, send them on their way and not say anything. So what happened? In Genesis chapter 42, we read that Joseph remembered the dream that he had had many years before about his brothers. Notice the little nudge? God does that to us, gentle and soft. I encourage you to look at the account and read it for yourselves. It's certainly worth reading. The framework is beginning to form because this is a picture about family, about reconnection, about forgiveness, about new beginnings, and about grace. You may well have people close to you who have hurt you, intentionally or not. Relatives, friends, others with whom you struggle. I understand that pain from the past takes some dealing with, processing it. And as we reflect upon the gospel message, which we have listened to again over the recent Easter celebrations, we recognise that we ourselves are far from perfect. In fact, Romans 3:23 puts it this way: all have sinned, all have fallen short of the glory of God. Oh, it's so easy to point out the faults in others, while at the same time missing our own shortcomings. Jesus states in Matthew 7:5, "Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." Quite challenging. Not one of us is right with God, and so often we lay the blame on others for our own shortcomings. Personally, I really appreciate and love the word grace. Joseph exercised grace toward his brothers because God had shown him grace. Romans 5:8 describes it well. But God has shown us how much he loves us. It was while we were still sinners that Christ died for us. When we forgive others, that is, when we are gracious, it seems that we are the very ones who gain the most from that grace because we become the beneficiary. So if there are people, family members, friends, or even people from church who have hurt you, and you're finding it difficult to move forward, let me use this statement. You've heard it before. Let go and let God. Be gracious and demonstrate grace that comes from the very heart of God to you. You don't have to do this alone. Remember, Jesus promised to never leave us nor forsake us. Hold on to that promise. Remember that we are blessed to be a blessing. Have a wonderful week, and may God richly, richly bless you in abundance.